Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We are holding a Mishnah Berurah Chelik Vav. We'll be learning today Mirz Hashem Daf Lamed Hey Amid Beis. We are continuing to learn halachos Tisha B'av. We pick up today in the midst of Siman Taf Kuf Nun Tes on the bottom line of Lamed Hey Amid Aleph. We had already begun Siv Zayin, but I'm going to read from the beginning of Siv Zayin the words of the Mechaber for the sake of continuity. Says the Mechaber, Im yesh tinoik lomul. If on Tisha B'av we're making a Bris Milah, if there's a baby who needs a bris on Tisha B'av, malanaisai achar shegarmim hakinais. We learned this yesterday. The Mechaber says that the bris is done after the completion of kinnis, and the Chavetz Chaim said in the Mishnah Berurah that the reason is because the mitzvah of Milah is a mitzvah that Klal Yisrael does b'simcha. We do it with great rejoicing, and therefore it would not be appropriate to do it in the midst of kinnis. Instead, we wait for kinnis to be complete, and then we take on the simcha of the Bris Milah. However, that was one opinion. Now says the Mechaber, V'yesh mamtinen l'mulai ad achar chatzos. There are those who say that it would be better for us to wait until after chatzos. In the Berurah, this is brought down from the Mordechai. So there are those that say that we should wait until after chatzos. Says the Mishnah Berurah, nice cotton chavav here on Lamed Hey Amid Beis. Because before Chatzos, we are really in the throes of Avelus, and it's not worth it to go ahead and make a Bris Milah. But the first opinion brought down by the Mechaber, who says that we do it before Chatzos, just after Kinnis, Severe law, they hold the Afal Pikein mitzvah lahagdim. It's still a mitzvah. It would be better to make the bris earlier. Make it before Chatzos, make it after Kinnis. Why? There's reason magdimin lemitzvahs, because we have the concept of zrizus. Zrizus tells us reason magdimin lemitzvahs. A zariz, a person who is diligent in his mitzvahs, who performs his mitzvahs with alacrity, he goes ahead and when there's a mitzvah to be done, he does it right away. I think this is just a good spot to just mention for a minute the concept of zrizus. If you learn Mesillas Yesharim and you see what zrizus is the second of the steps towards perfection discussed by the Mesillas Yesharim. The first is zehirus, the second is zrizus. Zrizus, if I wanted to encapsulate quickly, say something about zrizus, a person who's a zariz, he realizes that the Rabbeinu Shalom wants him to do certain things. Imagine if the Melech called you up. Now you were in the palace, and the Melech says, Rabbi Yankel, could you bring me a coffee? So Avada, you would go run, and you'd go get the Melech a coffee. You're not going to say, the Melech wants a coffee. Okay, so, I'll go out of the throne room, and then I'll walk by in the hall, and I'll meet somebody, and I'll schmooze with him for 5 minutes. Then there's an email I have to finish writing. I'll finish writing the email. And then I have a couple of phone calls I have to make. And then eventually I'll get around to going and making the coffee and bring the Melech the coffee. Now, if the Melech says, Yankel, bring me a coffee, obviously you're going to go right away. You're going to drop everything else and you're going to bring the Melech a coffee. If you have a mitzvah that's upon you to do, that's the Melech Malchei Amlochim is asking you to do something. If the Melech Malchei Amlochim HaKadosh Baruch Hu asks you to do something, Avada, you're going to drop everything else and you're going to go ahead and you're going to do it. That's Zrizin Magdimin LeMitzvahs. Somebody who's a Zariz, somebody who recognizes the Oil HaMitzvahs, somebody who recognizes that a mitzvah represents his avodah to the Rabbeinu Shalom, his service to the Rabbeinu Shalom, obviously Magdimin LeMitzvahs. He's going to go ahead with alacrity and he's going to do the mitzvah that's upon him to do right away. I can tell you, for example, that my Rebbe, Berurah, soll sein gesund und stark, we all have a mitzvah that begins right away on Shabbos afternoon. Shabbos afternoon, we daven mincha, and they lay in the beginning of the next parsha, and now we could start being Mavisedra for the next Shabbos. So that means that the mitzvah of being Mavisedra is upon us now. Now, many people, myself included very often, they take a whole week until they complete being Mavisedra. They finish being Mavisedra sometimes on Shabbos, on the following Shabbos. Berurah sits down right after Mincha and he starts being Mavisedra for the next week. 9.9 out of 10 times, Berurah is finished being Mavisedra on Motzei Shabbos. On Motzei Shabbos, he's already finished being Mavisedra for the next week. And I once asked him about it. He looked at me like I was nuts. He looked at me, he said, what do you mean? You have a mitzvah now to be Mavisedra. How are you going to wait? Can't wait. The mitzvah starts now, he does it now. That's Zrizin Magdimin LaMitzvahs. So the Svar Rishon over here that says that we should do the Bris Milah after Kinnis, even though it's before Chatzos on Tisha B'av, they hold that the concept of Zrizin Magdimin LaMitzvahs is even more important than the Avelus of Tisha B'av. Okay, now let's go back up to the Shulchan Aruch. So the Shulchan Aruch said, V'yesh mamtina naracha chatzos, we're in the top line of Lavan Hey with Beis. There are those that say that the bris should be delayed until after Chatzos. Now continues the Mechaber, and the Mechaber says, U'mevarchem berchas hamila, we make the brachas over the milah, all of the regular brachas, beloy bisamim. The Mechaber says a very interesting thing. He says we make the brachas, but we do not use bisamim. Now, before we discuss that, let's see what the Ramah says here in the parentheses. V'haminig kisvara rishona. The Ramah says that the minig, you want to know, we had two dais, we had two opinions over here. When you should make the bris. Should you make the bris after kinnis, before chatzos, or should you wait till after chatzos? Says the Ramah, v'haminig kisvara rishona. The minig is like the svara rishona, like the Mechaber said, that we should make the bris after kinnis, before chatzos. Now, what's at play over here? What is the Mechaber speaking about when he says the Mavarchem Berchas Hamila B'loy B'samim, that we make the brachas over the Bris Milah without B'samim? Says the Mishnah Berurah, nice cut and Chav Zayin. B'loy B'samim, we recite the brachas without using B'samim. Av shetamid gamkein ein meviin B'samim lamila. The Chavetz Chaim says, what B'samim are we talking about? We don't have B'samim by a Bris Milah, so why is the Mechaber telling me that on Tisha B'av you make the brachas without besamim? We never use besamim. So explains the Chavetz Chaim, Mikam Makayim, despite the fact that there's never a custom to use besamim, nevertheless the Mechaber still felt a need to tell me that on Tisha B'av specifically you should not use besamim. Why? Tzarech lash miyenu, the Mechaber felt that he had to tell us, to kahayoim gam kein ein meviin. All year we don't use besamim, and on Tisha B'av we also don't use besamim, even though there would be a reason to think that maybe we should. What's that reason? Explains the Chavetz Chaim, Ula afuke midas ha'ga'onim. This is to contrast to the opinion that we find brought down in the name of the Ga'onim. It's brought down in the Beis Yosef. Shesoivrin who hold, Tahayoim ein meviin kais lebracha, that when you make a Bris Milah on Tisha B'av, there is no kais shel bracha. We don't make a bari priagafen. We don't have wine, and we don't make a bari priagafen. Afilu litein latinoik. We don't even make a bari priagafen and then give the wine to a child. There were Ga'inim that said that on Tisha B'av, if you make a bris, no yayin. So what do you do instead of yayin? Elamivin b'samim b'makim kais l'bracha. So these Ga'inim held that since on Tisha B'av you don't use a kais shel bracha, so instead you bring b'samim and you make a bari mina b'samim. Kamash balon delay. The Mechaber is coming to tell me that we don't hold like those Ga'inim. And the reason is that we would not use besamim. There's no besamim because smelling besamim is also a tainug. It's also a pleasure. So the kaishal bracha, okay, the ones who disagree with these Ga'inim, they hold that the kaishal bracha is an integral part of the ceremony of the bris, and therefore we need, the brachas have to be made ala kais. So we're going to make the bracha, we're going to make a bari priagafen, and we're going to give it to a child. But we're not going to replace it with besamim, because besamim is not part of the ceremony. So why are we smelling besamim and having tainug and having pleasure on Tisha B'av? Now, that's the way the Chavetz Chaim understands this. The Aruch HaShulchan says differently. The Aruch HaShulchan brings down, he says, even though there is an accepted minig to go ahead and smell besamim and make a bracha over besamim by a bris, on Tisha B'av we don't do it. So the Chavetz Chaim was coming from a kasha. The Chavetz Chaim said it's unheard of. We never use besamim by a bris milah. Why do we have to point out that we don't use besamim by a bris milah on Tisha B'av? And he answers because we would have thought like the Ga'inim that we're going to replace the kaishal bracha with besamim. The Aruch HaShulchan didn't see a need for this kasha in this teretz. The Aruch HaShulchan says, no, there is a minig to use besamim by a bris milah, and the Mechaber is letting me know that on Tisha B'av it would be inappropriate because we avoid the extra tainug, the extra pleasure of the besamim. by the way, here you see another interesting thing, which is we know that we have the Chamisha Inuyim on Tisha B'av. We know we stay away from Achila, Shtia, and Sicha, and the Ilas Minolim, and Tashmish Amita. We know that we have these Chamisha Iyunim, but even something like smelling Besamim, which is not from the Chamisha Iyunim, it doesn't matter. Tisha B'av is not a time for pleasure, so we don't smell something pleasant on Tisha B'av. Eiskan Chavches. The Ramah said, "V'haminik isfara harishayna." So the Chavetz Chaim points out that there's a little bit of a textual anomaly over here. Hagazu tzricha lihiyos kaidem tevasu mevarchen. These words, "V'haminik isfara harishayna," really belong in the text before the Mechaber says mevarchen birchas hamila b'loy b'samim, because this "V'haminik isfara harishayna" is referring to the 2 days of when you make the bris, before chatzos or after chatzos. So it really belongs before the phrase "Umevarchem berchas hamila b'loy b'samim." Okay, now we go weiter. The end of the top line on Lamed Hey Amud Beis here in the Shulchan Aruch says the Mechaber, "V'im hayoledes mitzuya b'mkaim hamila." If the mother of the Rachanim oil is at the bris, yevarech al hakos. Then we make a bar pri agafen on the koshel bracha over the milah. V'tishta bimenu hayoledes. And the Mechaber says that the mother, she's a kimpetur, she's a chaya, she just gave birth 8 days ago, she'll drink the wine. Let's remember that the Mechaber said back in Taf Kuf Nun Dalid, right? Taf Kuf Nun Dalid. The Mechaber said in Taf Kuf Nun Dalid, in Sivav, on Lamed Aleph Amud Aleph, the Mechaber said, Chaya kol shloishim yom, a kimpetur for the first 30 days, v'chein chayla shu tzarech lechol, ein tzrichin oimed, elam achilin oisai miyad, demimkaim chayla legazer rabbanon. So according to the Mechaber, a woman who gave birth, all 30 days after she gave birth, she's not mechuyev to fast. So the Mechaber says there's a very easy answer of what to do with the koshel bracha. Make a bari pri hagafen over the koshel bracha, and be moitzi the mami, you be moitzi her in the bari pri hagafen, and she'll drink the yayin because she doesn't have to fast. So says the Mechaber, v'tishta mimenu hayeledes, v'husha tishma habracha v'loi tafsik b'dvarim b'shmias habracha l'shtiyas hakos. This works if she listens to the bracha, and she's not mafsik, she doesn't speak between hearing the bracha and saying amen, l'shtiyas hakos, to drinking the kos. That's what you do if the mami is present. V'im eina sham, if the mami is not there, then what do you do with the koshel bracha? Yevarech al hakos, the Mechaber says you make the bracha on the kos, v'yatim latinoikos, and you give a child the koshel bracha to drink. Okay, let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah in Ois Katan Lamid. No, I'm sorry. Ois Katan Chavtes. Hayaledes. If the mami is there, then she could listen to the bracha, the Bari Pri Hagafen, and she could drink the kos. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Ayin le'el b'simin tavkuf non daled sivav u'v'mishnah Berurah sham. What's the Chavetz Chaim pointing out? So I told you that the Mechaber is giving this eitzah that the mother should drink the yayin. That's based on the Mechaber's opinion that chaya kol shloishim yom, a kimpeter for the first 30 days, is not mechuyev to fast. But we learned also the words of the Ramah. The Ramah said that our minig is that the chaya, the kimpeter, does fast after the first 7 days. The Bris Milah is day 8. So we say like the Ramah that she should fast unless yesh lo tsar gadol, unless she's either sick or she's suffering. But a normal mommy, a healthy mommy, healthy baby, so really she should fast. So in that case, we wouldn't give her the koshel bracha. Instead, we would give the bracha to a child as the Mechaber's eitzah if the mother is not there. Eiskat lamed latinoikos, we could give the kos to a child. Says the Chavetz Chaim, v'loi chayshinan dilma asi lehisragel v'lishtais af begad lusai. Really, you might think that there's a problem in giving the koshel bracha to a child. If you give the koshel bracha to the child, you give him yayin to drink on Tisha B'av, maybe in his mind, he'll remember, oh, you're allowed to drink, and you're even allowed to drink wine on Tisha B'av. I remember when I was a kid, I was by the bris, they gave me wine to drink. So maybe we shouldn't give him wine to drink. Till dilma asi lihisragel, maybe he'll become used to this. The lishta, said he'll drink af begad lusai, even when he becomes a gadol. Says the Chavetz Chaim, there is no such fear. Kevan she'ein davar kavua. We don't always have a Bris Milah on Tisha B'av. This is a once in a blue moon thing that happened, that we have a bris on Tisha B'av. So we need a child, and we're going to give him the wine from the Koshel Bracha to drink. But this is not a davar kavua. This is not something that happens often. Aval gav de gabe havdalah, even though the halacha that we learned is, if Tisha B'av falls out on Motzei Shabbos, we don't make havdalah on a kais, on Motzei Shabbos. Tisha B'av is Sunday. We said we make havdalah Sunday night. We don't make havdalah Motzei Shabbos. Why? Because we can't drink the wine. What's the problem? Give the wine to a teenager to drink. Give the wine to a child. Over there we say, no, we can't make havdalah on Motzei Shabbos. We can't give a child the yayin to drink. We are concerned. In that case, we do not give the kais to a child to drink. We delay havdalah ala kais until Sunday night because we don't want to give it to a child because we're afraid he's going to get used to drinking on Tisha B'av. That's because the way our calendar is set up, every 3 or 4 years it comes out it comes out that Tisha B'av is on Motzei Shabbos. The choshev k'may davar kavua. That makes it a davar kavua. It is something that happens fairly regularly. And therefore, if this is something that kids are always going to see, that a kid drinks the havdalah kais on Motzei Shabbos, when it's Tisha B'av, they might come to drink on Tisha B'av. By Milah, there's no kvias at all. There's no such thing as a set that a Bris Milah falls out on Tisha B'av every few years. Me personally, I don't think I ever encountered a Bris Milah on Tisha B'av. So lo chashinon lazeh. Therefore, we don't have to be concerned with this. Okay. Now we go to Sif Ches, 4 lines down in the Shulchan Aruch. Bal Bris loivesh begadim acherim. This is very catchy over here, very tricky, the wording over here. Bal Bris loivesh begadim acherim. The Bal Bris, and we're going to define who the Bal Bris is. We're going to say the Sandik, the Moyel, the Viaben. What are they allowed to wear by the Bris Milah? Says the Mechaber loivesh begadim acherim. They could wear other clothing, which apparently means that they could wear nicer clothing. They could wear nicer clothing by the Bris Milah. They don't have to wear the not fresh clothing that they've been wearing all 9 days and that they're wearing on Tisha B'av. They could change and they could put on begadim michubadim. They could put on nicer begadim. Ach loy levanim mamish. But, says the Mechaber, they should put on mamish, freshly laundered, really white clothing. That they shouldn't do. Haga, says the Ramah, v'avia ben v'hamoyel v'hasandik, the father of the baby, the moyel, and the sandik who holds the baby, kulam nikra'im balei bris, they are all called the balei bris. They could all wear nicer clothing for the bris. Umutarim lilbaish bigdei Shabbos. And the Ramah says over here that they could even wear Shabbos clothing. La'achar shegamra kinnis, after the kinnis are complete, right? The Ramah said that that's the day that we follow, that the bris is done after kinnis. Ubar lo malatinai, when they're coming to do the Bris Milah, they could put on even Shabbos begadim. Aval lo yilbushu levanim, but they shouldn't mamish put on fresh, really nice white clothing. That's what the Ramah, that seems to be the way to read the Mechaber and the Ramah. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Ois Kot Lamed Aleph, begadim acherim, umutarim lahachlef hakutainis k'bay b'Shabbos chazon, and they could also change their kutainis. Exactly what this kutainis is, whether it's an undershirt, whatever it is, it's a beged that's only being changed, it's only worn for zayah. It's worn to absorb sweat. It sounds like an undershirt. They could put on a fresh undershirt. V'avi ben v'huadin imai, the father of the baby and the mother of the baby could put on fresh, nice clothing. Lamed Gimel, the Ramah said, even Bigdei Shabbos. Says the Chavetz Chaim, v'himheim chadashim, if they're new Bigdei Shabbos, shenikor hagiyutz bahen, you could see that they're mamish freshly pressed and freshly cleaned, asur l'lav shon, that you're not allowed to wear. The derech hachayim u'b'sefer Bigdei Yesham etzadeid, the dafke imheim chadashim mamish, it's only brand new clothing that they can't wear. Ava b'lavach yav shenikor hagiyutz shalehem muter. Uban lima latinok lachar amila paishtin bigdayan. After the bris, right away they have to go ahead and they have to change. Okay. Says the Shulchan Aruch Sif Tes. Tisha B'av shechal liyos b'Shabbos v'nidche liyoyim rishon. Let's say a bris falls out on Tisha B'av when Tisha B'av is a nidche. Tisha B'av fell out on Shabbos. The tainus was postponed until Sunday. And now on Sunday we have a Bris Milah. Now a nidche is always treated more kal. We treat it more leniently than the real day of Tisha B'av. So it says the Mechaber, Tisha B'av shechal liyos b'Shabbos, if Tisha B'av actually fell out on Shabbos, v'nidche liyom rishon, so that the fast was, you know what, I'm going to backtrack a second because I forgot in Sif Ches there was a bir halacha that I wanted to do. The Ramah said in Sif Ches that you're allowed to put on big day Shabbos for the Bris Milah. The father, the mother, the moil, and the sandik could wear big day Shabbos. Says the bir halacha, dibra maschal umutarim lilbaish big day Shabbos. Ayin b'sefer big day yesha. You should look in the sefer big day yesha. Shekasav writes to become malkaim also linol minolim. But you're not allowed to wear leather shoes. The shinoi begadim hu rak minig, because this that we don't wear freshly laundered clothing on Tisha B'av, that's not one of the chamisha inuyim. That's not an iser derabanan. Umutter levatla lefi shal lechvayid hamila. So we could be mevatel it, and we could allow you to go ahead and wear begadim mechubadim, to wear nice clothing in honor of the bris. But you can't be mevatel one of the chamisha inuyim. This that you're not allowed to wear leather shoes, that's one of the main chamisha inuyim. Shehu midina de gemara. That's a din derabanan. That we can't be mevatel. So l'chvay the bris, you can't go ahead and put on normal shoes. Now let's go back to Sif Tes in the Mechaber. Tisha B'av shechal liyos b'Shabbos. If Tisha B'av fell out on Shabbos, v'nidche liyoyim rishon, and the fast was postponed for the first to Sunday, and now there's a Bris Milah. So in that case, there's a very interesting halacha. Bal Bris mispalel mincha ba'oid hayoyim gadol, the father of the baby, and I believe, the mother. So the father, the mother, the moil, and the sandik, they all daven mincha by mincha gedola. Mincha gedola is a half hour after chatzos. So be'erich 12:30, or if we change the clock, be'erich 1:30, they're going to daven mincha early. They're roichetz, and then they could wash. They could wash themselves. Ve'enoi mashlim tanisai, and they don't have to finish out the tainus. They can eat. Levisha yomtiv shalayhu, because for them it's a yomtiv. So again, if somebody is making a bris on Sunday when we're holding the fast of Tisha B'av as a nidche, Tisha B'av that year was on Shabbos, so Sunday is the 10th day of Av, but the tainus is on Sunday, and you're making a Bris Milah, the mother, the father, the moil, and the sandik do not have to complete the tainus. They could daven mincha by mincha gedola, a half hour after chatzos, and then v'roichitz, they could go ahead, they could wash themselves, and they could sit down, and they could eat. Why? Because yomtiv shalayhu. For them, it's a yomtiv. They're making a Bris Milah. And it's not really Tisha B'av. It's really the 10th day of Av. The tainus is only a nidche. So it's a yomtiv for them. They could go ahead and they could eat. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ice Cotton Lamed Hay. On Lamed Hay, Amid Beis, Ice Cotton Lamed Hay in the Mishnah Berurah. The nidche. We're talking about when the fast is a nidche. When the fast was postponed until Sunday. Avol, says the Chavetz Chaim, however, im chal milah b'Tisha B'av shaloi nidche, but when the bris falls out on a real Tisha B'av, let's say Sunday is really Tisha B'av, or Tisha B'av is Monday or Tuesday, and you have a Bris Milah, sarich lahashlam atainis, then the mother, the father, the moil, and the sandik have to fast. V'lav davka b'Tisha B'av, that's not only true of Tisha B'av, which is a more chomer dikatainis, this would be true on any tainus tzibur. If you're making a bris on a tainus tzibur, you have to be mashlim the tainus. You have to fast the whole fast. Or on any of the 4 fasts. On a Asar B'Teves, Shavuot, Asar B'Tammuz, Tisha B'av, Tzom Gedalia. If it's not a nidche, you have to complete the tainus. V'chein adin le'inyan chasen b'yom chupasai. Bestam tainus tzibur, oy b'chal arba tzomos. The same thing would be true if somebody's getting married on the night after Asar B'Teves, or the night after Shavuot B'Tammuz. We don't make chasidus then. The night after Tzom Gedalia. somebody is getting married. So we know a chassan fasts the day of his chuppah. He fasts. Well, that's not negaya, the fact that I'm sorry, that was a slip of the tongue. Everybody's fasting. It's a tiny tzibur. And the chassan is getting married that night. Now, the day of your chuppah, when you get married, by your chuppah, that's a yom tov. Still, you have to complete the tainus. The chassan has to fast all the way until Tzeisak Echavim. If it's not a nidche, tzarich lahashlam tainus. The chassan has to complete the fast. So what do you do by the chuppah? If the chuppah is before shkia, who's going to drink the yayin? Who's going to drink the wine of the koshel bracha? You give it to a child. If the fast is a nidche, then ain't tzarich lahashlam u'mutar l'shtais hakos. The regel shaloyu. And also, as far as eating after the chuppah, normally the chassan fasts until after the chuppah. After the chuppah, he could eat. But if it's a tainus tzibur, he can't eat after the chuppah either. He has to be mashlim the tainus. But if it's a nidche, he could eat. Lamid vav, the mechaber said that this halacha, that you don't have to finish the tainus if it's a nidche, applies to the Baal Bris. Who's the Baal Bris? Says the Chavetz Chaim, b'chalal zeh, avi aben v'imay v'amayel v'asandik. This is the father, the mother, the mayel, and the sandik. Avaloya machnis v'hamoitzi, but not the ones who we call the kvaterin, the one who brings the baby in and takes the baby out. They're not considered the Baalei Bris. Excuse me. The cholshkein sharei kruim, certainly other people who are called to the bris, they're not considered the Baalei Bris, and they have to complete the tainus. Even though these Baalei Bris are allowed to eat, you don't make a big sudas bris. That you don't do. We said that the Baalei Bris have a mincha by mincha gedola. The achronim agree that when the mechaber says that they should be mispal mincha ba'oid hayom gadol, when it's still day, what does that mean? This means mincha gedola achar chatzos hayom, which is a half hour after chatzos. And then they're allowed to eat. But they should remember that since we're talking about Sunday, and it's Tisha B'av is Sunday, so they didn't make Havdalah Motzei Shabbos, they have to make Havdalah al HaKais before they eat. The reason they're allowed to eat is because for them today is a Yom Tov, they're making a bris. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Yesh, I remember there are those who say, Shahu Adin, that the same halacha would apply in Mechal Pidyon Aben b'Tisha B'av shenitche. Let's say somebody's making a Pidyon Aben on Sunday when Tisha B'av fell out on Shabbos, and the fast was a nidche to Sunday, and they're making a Pidyon Aben on that Sunday. Nikra Gamkein Etzla Yom Tov, that's also called a Yom Tov for the Baalei HaSimcha, the ha'av, and therefore the father, and I'm thinking the mother too, even though the Chavetz Chaim doesn't specify that, v'ha'kayin, and the kayin who's accepting the pidyon, ein tzrichen lahashlam ha'tainus, they do not have to complete the tainus, they could eat. But you don't make the Suda Shal Mitzvah of the Pidyon Aben on Sunday of Tisha B'av. That you make, I guess, another time. But the kayin and the Avi Ben, and I'm thinking the mother, could all eat. Shein mitzvah sasuda doicha tainus, because the mitzvah to make the suda of the Pidyon Aben, that's not doicha tainus. V'chanal in Baalei Bris. V'davke keshechal Pidyon Aben bezmanoi. This is only true when you're making the Pidyon Aben at the proper time. Shechal yom shloisha ve'echad shaloi boi b'yoyim. Day 31 is on Sunday of Tisha B'av, that's a nidche. But if the Pidyon Aben is not being made on time, even if day 31 was on Shabbos, and you can't do the Pidyon on Shabbos, so you're doing the Pidyon on Sunday, even though you have no choice, you can't make it on Friday, it's too early. You can't make it on Shabbos, you can't do the transaction of the Pidyon on Shabbos, so you're forced to do the Pidyon Aben on Sunday. Still, since it's day 32, not day 31, that's called Shaloi B'Zmanoi, Tzrichen Lahashlim. In that case, the Baalei HaSimcha do have to complete the fast. Okay, we're going to stop over here. As Hashem will pick up tomorrow with Siv Yud. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The schus of limud HaTorah should be made against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbe Hashem should send Yeshuas, Refuas, and Parnasa to all those in need. And we should be zeicha to see the Bias Gal Tzedek B'Meher V'Yameinu. With Purim coming up, we should be zeicha to Kimu V'Kiblu we should have a true Kabbalah HaTorah. Chazal tell us that the Kabbalah HaTorah on Purim was a bigger Kabbalah HaTorah than the Kabbalah HaTorah that happened by Maimon Har Sinai. We should be Zeicha to the Kimu V'Kiblu. We should be Zeicha to that true Kabbalah HaTorah and to have an Aliyah from Purim. Be well.